At this time, we're going to turn over to the superintendent's report, and 10.1, I'm going to call on Dr. Little. Dr. Little?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, board. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to just be very quick. I just want to celebrate one quick thing. On yesterday, I was going to say on Monday, making it feel like it was more dramatic, but it was really yesterday. We welcomed back our 7th and 8th graders for our middle schools, and so we are now K through 8 are attending the 4+1 model, and we are very excited about that. And Dr. Rivers is going to give us an update on really where we are in phase 2 as of November 17th, and he has I think some good information for us tonight. I know one of the things that everybody is curious about is kind of where we are with the Lula for next semester. I think we're just over 18% of students who are still choosing Lula for next semester. Many of them are the older that they get. A lot of the changes from our elementary and middle school grade levels, and I think we'll be able to walk through that a little bit of that explanation tonight. But would like to welcome Dr. Rivers here tonight as we walk through a phase 2 academic reentry plan update.
Thank you, Dr. Little, and good evening, Madam Chair, board members. And this evening, I'll be presenting an update on the academic reentry plan for high schools. Before I discuss these updates, I'd like to share with you an overview of the lessons we learned during the first 9 weeks.
It's a very dramatic pause there. We were talking about lessons.
Okay. There we go. So what did we learn during the first 9 weeks? We learned that the impact of exposure in quarantining students and our staff is far more significant when we are not able to socially distance. We learned that quarantining is disruptive to the educational environment. We learned that while the hybrid model is not ideal, it provides a stable educational experience for our students. We learned that it is easier to organize with social distancing at the elementary level. We learned that it will take deliberate steps with safety checks in between to keep our schools open for face-to-face learning. This next slide represents the model that we are using to make informed decisions on maximizing face-to-face instructions. This involves assessing our situation, planning our procedures, and acting on our plans. We said from the beginning that we will do our very best to be very deliberate with our decisions. Next, I would like to remind you of our first transition target timeline. Our school year started on Monday, August 31st. Seems like such a long time ago, but not really. 5 weeks later, on October 5th, we transitioned our youngest learners, pre-K through 2nd grade, in cohorts A and B back to school in the 4+1 model. We also brought back students with IEPs served in self-contained classes in grades 3 through 12, and some English language learners in grades 3 through 5. And that was on October 5th. 2 weeks later, on October 19th, we transitioned grades 3 through 5 in cohorts A and B back to school. So at that point, we had all students back in our elementary schools. At that time, at one of our school board meetings, we decided that middle school would return in early November. On this slide, you will see that on November 9th, cohorts A and B for 6th grade returned to school in the 4+1 model. This week, on Monday, November 16th, we welcome cohorts A and B for grades 7 and 8 back to school. So now we have all our students in grades pre-K through 8 back in school in the 4+1 model. This now leads me to share the date of return for high school students. Our high school students will return to school in the 4+1 model on January 19th for 2nd semester. Although we discussed the possibility of bringing high school students back to school earlier in December, January, before the beginning of 2nd semester, and after the installation of plexiglass in our classroom, we realized that might be an unnecessary disruption. At that time, we will also have students who have selected to switch from Lula to face-to-face return to our school. So when we come back in January, we'll make that switch. Parents who are making the decision to come back from Lula to face-to-face will have that option, and they've taken the survey, so we welcome more students back on January 19th. There are several considerations that I would like to share regarding a decision to wait until the second semester for students to return to 4+1 model. First, high school schedules are not assigned solely by grade. So when you think about elementary school and middle school, we can bring one grade level back in at a time. There's not much disruption. Unlike the elementary and middle grades, it is impractical to phase in high school students since their schedules are not assigned strictly by grade. For instance, a freshman may have a first block class with seniors and a second block class with sophomores and freshmen. Next, in high school, some of our staffing ratios are much larger in those classes. This means we could have more students in the classroom compared to elementary and middle school, and elementary, as you know, has that family model in place. Next, we want to minimize staff and student exposure. That was one of our considerations. The other consideration that we have right now, we're in our Thanksgiving and winter break exposures. And so we're noticing some things happening in our communities as far as spikes in the increase in number of COVID cases. And so that Thanksgiving break, making sure our students and families are safe before they go home and when they return, as well as winter break around that time frame too. Next, it is possible that we will have to quarantine more students and staff. So when you think about the elementary model, it's a family model, but in high school, students move class and there are more transitions and they're in different classes as individuals. So there's more opportunities to quarantine students and staff once someone is exposed. And as I just mentioned, we are seeing an increase in the number of COVID-19 cases in the community. And that was another consideration we had for waiting for high school return in January 19th. Also, one thing, once we come back from winter break on Monday, January 4th, teachers will spend that time with their students reviewing for exams. So it's kind of a review week that we're talking about. And then the next week, we will be administering exams. So if we were to come back in January, that's a review time period. And then it's also a time to take exams. And so there was a consideration we had to wait until January 19th at the start of second semester. Once we factor that in, it seemed wiser not to disrupt the semester right now before exams when we could wait a few weeks and instead begin when the second semester starts. The next thing that we've talked about is what about those students who are struggling? And that can be students who are in face-to-face and students are also in Lula. And that's the online academy. Teachers and administrators will reach out to students struggling in first semester and provide greater support to them during these last few weeks of the semester. And so as we head into the second 9 weeks now, second quarter, we'll begin reaching out to students and trying to help them before the semester is over. We will continue to bring back students from the online academy. From the beginning in August till now, high schools have been very accommodating to families who wanted to make a switch from Lula. They made decisions that was in the best interest of their child over the summer. They noticed that their child is struggling in Lula online, so they would contact Central Services, Instructional Services, and say, can my child transfer to face-to-face, the hybrid setting? And in many cases, we had space, so we would accommodate those parents in high school on an as-needed basis. And so they would make those phone calls. I would check with the high school principals to see if there was space there, and we would move them back. So that's been ongoing since August 31st up until now. Another way we'll help students who are struggling, we're going to use our Fridays for extra help sessions and to support teacher-student conferences too. And so those Fridays are those e-learning virtual days. Teachers are available to have Zoom meetings. They are available for individual conferences and group help sessions too. And so we're going to continue to use those Fridays and maximize that time. We also have staff who are conducting home visits. When we know students are not engaged in Lula, we are finding time and using staff and administrators to make visits, social workers to make visits to home, and counselors to catch those students. And then we will offer some grade recovery for first semester assignments. Sometimes the students have missed an assignment and they earned a low grade. We're going to make time in this first semester so they can recover that grade to hopefully improve their average in the class. Some additional notes. Bringing high school students back will challenge us more than any other grade level has. Students change classes, as I mentioned, often during the day. They have additional opportunities to gather outside the classroom as they change classes. They participate in athletics, they participate in performing arts, and other activities, and that's the high school setting. From the very beginning, we committed ourselves to maximizing student and staff exposure minimizing, student and staff exposure as much as possible to keep our students and staff safe. The better we do that, the safer our families are in the long run. I also want you to know that we recently looked at a number of failures from the first marking period in our secondary schools, and that's Q1 in the first 9 weeks. The data informed us that the students in our hybrid model were doing as well as or better than students at this time last year for Q1. And that's something good to know. When we talk about the hybrid face-to-face model, and that's right now for our high school students, that's 2 days of face-to-face instruction, 3 days of virtual. Middle school students have just gone back the last 2 weeks. So we looked at Q1 grades, and we had all secondary students, middle through high schools, in 2 face-to-face days. The number of failures from Q1 was better than or as good as it was Q1 in the previous school year. So the conclusion from that is hybrid face-to-face is working for our students. And I just kind of wanted to share that information. For the online academy, that is brand new. And so the number of student failures was higher for our online academy students compared to the hybrid students. And that is to be expected right now. It's a new platform for our students. Teachers and students are getting used to it. And so we can't draw too many conclusions from it right now, but that's something that we're going to dig deeper into to see what's happening, what's going on, and how we can best support our students in that platform. So we're going to do all the interventions I just shared to help our Lula students, online students, to finish our semester and to bring their grades up. And we're going to intensify those efforts to support those students. At this point, this concludes the information for the return of high school students to the 4+1 model. We are suggesting that they return on January 19th at the beginning of second semester. If you have any questions, I can answer those now.
Dr. Rivers.
Yes.
It's Jada. Thank you for that. When you said Lula had a higher fail rate than hybrid, do you have those numbers with you?
I have some numbers. I can certainly share those after the presentation. And Dr. Phillips, his team gathered the numbers for us, so would like for him to share them completely. But what I have right now, the number of students with at least 1 or more Fs for Q1 is right around 42% of our Lula students.
Okay, thank you. I know read something in the paper this week. Greenville County Schools actually released all of those results. So if you have any more, I mean, like you said, we can get together after the presentation, but I'd like to see some of those numbers for everything.
And then I'll just spotlight to compare the two. The face-to-face hybrid students, that was 15.1% or 15% of our students had at least 1 F in a class compared to online at 42%.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
You had an interesting comment in there where it said it was easier to organize social distancing at the elementary level. That almost runs counterintuitive to your thinking, because you would think K-5 are like herding kittens sometimes, and so to try to keep them 6 feet apart would be, an astronomical feat. But I guess what you're saying is the organization of keeping them distanced, as opposed to a high school where they are blended, changing classes, so on and so forth. It's more difficult to organize as opposed to implement, I guess. Is that a fair assessment?
That's correct. The family model, which we love, and it works so well in elementary school level, where you're just in that one class. And in many cases, most of us will tell you that sometimes the elementary students are slightly more compliant with knowing where they're supposed to sit and what they're supposed to do when directed by the teacher. And so that model works. And in addition, if you have to quarantine, you're just quarantining one classroom. And so when we talk about social distancing at the middle and even high school level, there's more movement in the hallways independently. Elementary students move together and under direction of an adult. Middle and high school transitions happen on their own. And so all those things increase the ability to contract or anything of that nature, and to social distance as well.
Sure. Yeah, and this is fairly consistent with what we see at our office level. I think for the most part, teenagers are adults, And once they have that driver's license and that mobility picks up, then their spread of COVID is going to pretty much be on par with what you would expect with the adult population. Middle school and younger, obviously different story. They're usually being taken somewhere by a parent, and the philosophy has been if you don't have to take them, you don't, sort of thing here recently. So we obviously aren't seeing the spread in our younger ages. So that kind of plays out with exactly what we're seeing in the community. And to your point, unfortunately, we are seeing the numbers kind of going in the wrong direction.
Yes.
Our fears are kind of coming a little bit true in that we're starting to see that spike. I would kind of caution and say that it's not the daily cases right now that alarm you so much. It's 10 to 15 days from now. And so while we may see 1,600 cases today, we may only see 7 deaths. Well, once you fast forward that, because of the amount of time it takes to get sick, and then the amount of time you spend in the ICU, and then the eventuality of potential death, that's usually 15 days down the road. Right. And so that's always the scarier thing to be concerned about is when we see this spike like this, what are things going to look like 2 weeks from now? That's the most alarming.
I would just like to take a point of personal privilege and give a shout out to Coach McKinney at River Bluff, who is my son's world history teacher and showed up at my house on Friday to give Trevor Oreos. He's been doing little mini games and contests each week, and every Friday he goes out. He said, I just wanted to see my kids. And so he's been going and taking pizzas and cookies and things. He's been to Peelian and out to Gilbert. And so just to see a teacher show up, it made my son's day, just to have that little bit of personal attention. So shout out.
Thanks for sharing.
Dr. Rivers, I did want to let you know, I have heard from several community members, and they didn't even know that this was going to be proposed, and this is what they proposed to me.
Great.
And the reason being is that we're so close to the end of the year, and they're worried about the spike at Thanksgiving and then how it could impact their Christmas holidays, their winter break. And they said everybody's kind of in a pattern now, and they thought it would be better to wait until January to bring the high school kids back, just to keep the numbers down for the COVID. And also I did hear from several, they have college kids coming home next week, and they're very concerned about what those kids are going to bring home, and then the possibility of their younger kids taking that back into the high school. So just from the parents I've heard from, this is what they're telling me that they've wanted. So I just want to let you know that we're thinking, from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, we've had conversation with several students, and they don't want the disruption right now. They felt like it's a better transition, second semester, and with too many things happening right now.
Right.
So, great point.
I agree. Any other comments or questions, board? Okay. Dr. Rivers, thank you so much. Is there
Okay,
anything
welcome.
else you
Thank
want to update us on? Okay. Dr. Little?